Breaking news, secret pictures of the Nikon Z-FC have leaked, and they reveal a plan for Nikon to directly attack Fuji to try to steal some of its mirrorless market share. I'm going to tell you all about this, show you the pictures, and talk about what Nikon did wrong with this camera. But first, a word from our sponsor, Squarespace. You need a proper website, not just social media, which is filled with ads and could be changed at any point. Get your own domain name, take orders, and set up appointments from clients. Head to squarespace.com/Tony and try it out completely free. You'll see your website will look awesome in just a few minutes. And when you're done with the free trial, use the coupon code TONY to save yourself 10%. Thanks, Squarespace, and thank you to Nikonrumors.com, which brings us these leaked pictures. I want to go off on a tangent and thank all of the rumor sites because they do such a favor to the consumers by revealing this information. You see, the way camera companies usually work is they put reviewers, like myself, under a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, and they tell them about the camera ahead of time so that they can do a big launch. By giving select reviewers advance notice about the camera, they allow those reviewers to prepare the best presentations and launch on minute one of the announcement, and that's when most of the people are going to get the news. They very carefully pick the reviewers that are going to discuss this new product, and in that way you don't really get an unbiased view of a new product release, at least on day one. Later, other reviewers will be able to get that information and tell you about it, but even missing a few hours after the embargo end means that not nearly as many people are going to see your content. So by sort of taking this private information and making it public, they allow a broader variety of reviewers to look at it and disseminate it to you along with their assessments of it. Now let's look at this picture. You can see the close-up of the viewfinder of the new ZFC. And it's very different. This is a retro styled camera with both chrome and black. And in this back picture, we can see what looks like a flip screen must be flipped out to the side. And look at the top left of the camera, very reminiscent of the Nikon DF retro styled camera because there is a physical ISO dial there, as well as a little MASP, which are the modes, manual, aperture, shutter, and program mode. You'll also see leather styling at the top. Looking at the right side, we see an analog dial for the shutter speed with 1/3 step here written in blue that'll allow you to use a back dial to sort of fine-tune the shutter speed since these are in full stop increments. We see a physical exposure compensation dial with the numbers written on it and retro-styled little LCD screen and shutter button. Why would anybody want this? After all, on any of the existing cameras, you can dial in your shutter speed, your aperture, and your ISO using the soft buttons at the back, which kind of change purpose depending on which mode that you're in. I absolutely love the experience of using analog controls with 3 separate physical rings for the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. Not only do I find it a nice experience to get away from screens and soft buttons, but I like to be able to dial those in as I'm picking up my camera so that before I even take it to my eye, I've got all my settings controlled. With conventional cameras, you have to look at the screen while you're making these adjustments. Functionally, it's the same, but what's different is the experience. And that's what the ZFC is about. It's about providing a better experience of photography. Some of you aren't going to understand this. You're going to say, oh no, I only care about functionality. I drive a Toyota Prius and all of my walls are white because that is functional. Other people care a little bit about design. You care about fashion. You care about what things look like, what things feel like. Photography isn't just for work. It can be fun. The experience of taking pictures can be enjoyable. A camera can look nice when it's slung on your shoulder or around your neck. It can be a fashion accessory. This is okay. I get that much of my audience is very functionally focused, but there's a huge market of people out there who love this sort of thing. And most of them right now are buying Fuji because only really Fuji has figured out how to make cameras that look and feel good while still taking good pictures. These mock-ups have a different dial design, but they do show you the sort of flat body with no real grip and how that looks with the existing Nikon DX APS-C lenses. I should have mentioned that this is not a full-frame camera, and that's going to be really disappointing to some. But you do have the option of putting a Metabones speed booster on there and using old full frame lenses and still getting that full frame experience. So if you do want to go full retro, it's going to be all manual. There's going to be no image stabilization or autofocus, but you will get the opportunity to use an aperture ring on those older Nikon F lenses. This sort of black and chrome and leather design harkens back to a time when Nikon was the #1 manufacturer. They're like #5 in the mirrorless segment now, so they're really struggling. And I personally love the look and feel of these old Nikon DSLRs. Notice that it's actually a really thin body, especially compared to a lot of the Nikon DSLRs, which have gotten really big and bloated. And this was their professional model. Oh, I love that feel and sound, the thumb dial and the shutter. I'm sure they didn't recreate that part of the experience, but there's really nothing else like it. There's just something lost in the current digital world. And I hope Nikon does bring us a little closer to that. Here are my thoughts on the specs. It's supposed to be priced at $1,000. So it's not going to be a high megapixel full frame camera with 4K, 60 or 8K. I think it's going to have a 24 megapixel sensor, probably the standard anti-aliasing filter. It's probably going to be a lot like the sensor from a Nikon D3300. In other words, it's not going to blow you away with the image quality. But again, this is a camera that's more about the experience. I think it will have 4K video just at 30 frames per second. I think no way they're going to give you sensor stabilization, and it's just going to have a single SD card slot. But they're targeting that lower price point. They want people who are maybe buying their very first camera to pick something that's fun and attractive. It's a formula that's been working for Fuji, and Nikon wants to buy it off of it. Nikonrumors is also suggesting that there might be some new Nikon DX lenses to go with it. Right now, Nikon only has 2 very basic zoom lenses for their DX cameras. Otherwise, you're adapting a full-frame lens or adapting an old DSLR lens. Nikonrumors thinks the new DX lenses are going to be a 28mm f2.8, which is probably going to be a thin pancake lens, and a 35mm f1.8, which would be like a normal lens, like a 50mm full-frame equivalent lens, so something good for walking around or street photography. They're warning us that these lenses aren't going to be retro-based. I think it's real weird that you'd put the ultra-modern black Nikon Z lenses on this retro-styled body. When Nikon released the DF retro-styled DSLR, they also released some retro-styled lenses, because otherwise it just doesn't complete a cohesive package. Let's talk about why Nikon is doing this. These are the latest mirrorless market share numbers from SIPA. Sony has 35%, Canon has 30%, Fuji has 12%, Olympus left the camera industry with 8%. That's right. Fourth place couldn't make it work so badly that they completely exited the industry. Nikon is selling worse than Olympus. Nikon really needs to make mirrorless work, especially because they haven't been releasing any new DSLRs. Keep in mind, Nikon is still the #2 DSLR manufacturer behind Canon, but they're kind of letting the DSLR business grow cobwebs as they put all their R&D into a mirrorless market that isn't taking off. So they're kind of sacrificing the DSLRs, but the mirrorless isn't picking up their own weight. And well, I'm glad to see that they're trying something new, because I think this just might work for them. However, if we compare this to what would be the closest competitor, the Fujifilm X-T4, we'll see it has some disadvantages. First, the X-T4 is a more expensive camera, so we do expect it to have more. It has things like sensor stabilization and 2 card slots. But maybe more importantly, the Fujifilm system has a lot of really high quality designed for DX lenses, and they're priced like APS-C smaller lenses. Again, Nikon currently has 2 consumer grade DX zoom lenses, nothing intended for professionals, no primes. I'm sure Nikon will make more DX lenses later, but right now, if you're an enthusiast shopping for a retro styled APS-C camera, 100% Fuji provides a much better overall infrastructure, even if this body ends up performing really, really well. Be sure to subscribe, because we will do a full review. I'm confident this body won't be able to support autofocusing with older Nikon lenses, because that requires a focusing motor in the body. That would need to be built into the FTZ adapter from Nikon, which allows you to connect DSLR lenses to the new mirrorless cameras. And their current model of adapter does not have the focusing motor built into it, so you're manually focusing. But maybe that's okay, because after all, you are going for a retro experience with this camera. As I closely examine the pictures, I do see what seems to be some serious design flaws in how they're implementing the analog functionality. First, they're still relying on the PASM convention for selecting your camera settings. The PASM system evolved as manufacturers started sort of piecemeal creating auto exposure systems for their cameras. So at first it was really just like an automatic shutter speed. And then later when they added automatic control of aperture, they just added it as a separate mode. But none of this really makes any sense. I think the only current system that does make sense for selecting your camera settings is the Fuji system. Fuji has it right. You select the aperture on a dial on the lens. You select the shutter speed on a dial. You select the ISO on a dial. And if you don't want to think about a setting, you just set that dial to automatic. So you never have to think, am I in shutter priority or manual mode, or is it manual mode with auto ISO or manual ISO? No, you just think about the individual settings, and anything you don't want to control, you set to auto. With the new Nikon ZFC, if you decided, oh, I don't want to control the aperture right now, I will have to switch it to shutter priority. Or if you don't want to control both the shutter and the aperture, you would have to switch it to program mode. And then I guess setting the ISO to manual or automatic must be done actually in the menu system somewhere. It's just much less straightforward. The Nikon Z lenses also do not have physical aperture ring on them. There's a ring you could use to control the aperture, but it doesn't have the physical markings, which means the camera needs to be on. You need to be looking at the screen in order to set it. And again, just part of that experience of photography, I love being able to dial in the aperture on a physical ring with physical markings on it. Also, minor point, they don't seem to have a screw thread on the shutter button. I like the screw thread because you can put on a little custom shutter button. It's just one way to customize your camera. In the comments down below, I'd love to hear what you think about the new ZFC. Is it a hit or a miss? Would you think about getting one? Are they just too far behind Fuji to possibly make any progress against this well-established player in providing excellent photography experiences? And thank you to our sponsor, Squarespace. They're perfect for your photography portfolio. I have several different Squarespace websites. It makes sense to have a separate portfolio for weddings and for family portraits and for boudoir or for your fine art prints. After all of your individual clients need a personalized landing page. They each need different types of branding, different search keywords. Get multiple different Squarespace websites for every different aspect of your business, and you'll still be able to take orders on all of them. I have all of my orders for prints funneled in through ShipStation. Makes it super easy to set up at squarespace.com/Tony. Try it out for free, and when you love it, use the coupon code Tony for 10% off. Thank you, Squarespace.